Hey, welcome to another Enneagram podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yet another Enneagram podcast. But this one's different. Another Enneagram podcast is here to help you be a better leader for your team.
We know leadership is already challenging enough, and it can be downright frustrating when your team communication breaks down.
Another Enneagram podcast is here to tell you stories of leaders just like you who are learning how to lead their teams better with the Enneagram. If you want your team to communicate better, be more productive, and love their jobs, another Enneagram podcast is for you.
What's going on, Ryan?
Man, just another day in Arkansas,
Yeah.
Got some decent weather here and just busy.
Yeah.
You?
Man, it's beautiful outside. Trying to wade through some waters of whether or not summer camp is happening and all the craziness that comes along with that. So
Yeah.
just kind of in the waiting game.
So we talked about some TV shows that we might want to discuss on the podcast here. So, lots of people locked down, staying at home. And, while it's been bad business for a lot of different industries, one of the ones that is booming is, the streaming services.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. And especially, Disney had a great time recently with all the new Star Wars stuff coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix, their user database has skyrocketed. I'm sure that all the others, Hulu, Amazon, everything else, are enjoying some good times right now.
Yeah.
So what are the shows that, or have you been binge watching any shows, or what's it been?
Man, I'm not really a binge watcher. I'm a turn the TV on when I lay down at night, and then we'll see how far I make it into an episode before I fall asleep,
Yeah.
But so with that right now, I'm going back through Breaking Bad and love that show, man. Highs and lows. It's I'm probably 40% in right now. And so there's some pretty heavy stuff happening, and I love it. What about you?
Man, so my wife and I, we have been watching some shows. I know that probably most people aren't doing this, but we have the Apple TV Plus thing, which honestly, they don't have like the most amount of programming right now. They're still building their kind of content library, but it's also cheaper than other services, right? It's like $6 a month, I think. And it's actually free for a year if you got like a new phone anytime in the last year or something. So that's pretty sweet. And what I will say is the shows that we have watched, we've loved. So the very first show that they put out was called The Morning Show with Steve Carell, Jennifer Aniston, and Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, yeah.
And it's incredible. It's one of those where, when an episode ends, you're like slack-jawed and want to scream, but you can't. And it's not like Netflix where the next episode's there. They're doing it like actual TV show where you got to wait a week for something to be released. And so, yeah, we watched that one. We loved that. We watched C with Jason Momoa. The guy that played Aquaman, which is really good. And then those were kind of the first round of shows. But the second ones that just came out that we have really been enjoying, there's a show called Defending Jacob about this kid who gets basically accused of murder, and his dad is like trying to prove that he, didn't do it. And then another one called Trying, which is a British show about this couple who's trying to adopt, and it's freaking hilarious. I just love it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, but then of course, always in the background in our house is The Office. That's just the show that, we watch it pretty much every night. It's just kind of our daily wrap up routine. And so we're both obsessed with that. So yeah, there's those. There's certainly some other ones too. I feel like you get to a place with The Office where it can just as easily be like music. It's just background noise. Oh yeah.
And it's still so great.
Yeah.
So you can just drop in anywhere you want. You know what's going on. You love it.
Yeah. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about the Enneagram and stress. But to do that, we thought we might actually take that conversation through some of these classic shows that, hopefully you are watching or have watched, and talk about some of the different characters, what Enneagram types we think they are. But then in particular, when we see them in a really stressful state on the show, how they kind of unravel, how they move towards, their stress number. Some people call that like the disintegration number, and what that looks like for them. The reason this is good to know. I think this has a huge impact on teams, and especially if you're a leader listening to this, how to be able to care for your teams and lead them well. Before we jump into the television character stuff, Cody, why do you think it's important for teams and leaders to be aware of the numbers that they take on qualities of under stress? Why is that important?
Yeah. I mean, first off, it honestly acts as kind of a red flag system. I think it's kind of those when you're driving on the highway and you start seeing orange cones, you can't keep driving straight. You're going to have to merge a little bit. And so, yeah, I think those integration, disintegration numbers act as, kind of red flags, green flags as to, hey, I'm moving towards an unhealthy state. Hey, I'm starting to gravitate maybe towards a healthy state, and I'm being surprised by these things I'm seeing in integration, which is cool. And to talk about it in the context of quarantine is I would imagine that certain coworkers and teammates are probably seeing things from their teammates and coworkers that they've never seen before.
Yeah.
There's certain stresses that are present in life right now that probably aren't present in the office, on a daily basis. And so there's probably bosses going, hey, why is John freaking out like this? Or, why is he on Zoom calls just looking like he's melting? And so it's not all, I think it's obviously beneficial to know them for yourself, but then for you leaders out there to know those numbers and how things start to gravitate, during stress or during kind of healthier points. I think is great as a leader. That way you can come alongside your staff and your teams and just be a coach and a guide and more of an asset.
Yeah, I love that. So let's do this. Let's talk about some of these shows. And my goal in this is to hit at least one person of every number on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So we'll take a couple of shots at some things to start with, different shows that we know we like, and then I'll keep track of the numbers that we talk about and the ones that we don't, and then we'll try to come back in and fill in the gaps for the numbers that we didn't hit. So
sounds great.
What show you want to start with first?
Well, you brought up The Office, so I feel like that's probably the best place to start.
Yeah. We love The Office, man. And my wife and I have had long conversations about, what Enneagram type different characters on there are. Honestly, I could fill up most of this list probably. So I'm going to refrain from doing that. Instead, why don't we pick maybe just like two characters from The Office.
Okay.
And run with those. So
okay.
My submission to the list is Dwight.
Dwight. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just because we were talking about it earlier, let's go with Jim. Let's talk about old Jim boy.
Okay. All right. Jim's a challenging one. And both of these, honestly, are ones I've seen people like nearly get in fights about, about what Enneagram type they are. And so we may get some listener blowback from this one, but
okay. So
I'm very confident on Dwight. Yeah.
Okay. So Dwight,
you start though, since I feel so confident. You start, that way I don't squash whatever you're going to say.
I think Dwight, there's a lot of attributes of an 8 there that I can see. I think there maybe are these elements of a 5 that you could pull out. The dude knows just a silly amount of information about a ton of random things. But then he's also a dude that was raised on a beet farm, a German raised on a beet farm. So, that's awesome. So, those are probably like right off the top of my head, but you're confident. So what you got?
Yeah, so I'm very confident in this, and I think I can convince you.
Okay.
I believe Dwight is a counterphobic 6.
Oh, okay. Okay.
When you think about all of the plans that Dwight has in place for if this happens, right? Or the weapons that he has around the office. When Roy charges in to beat up Jim, Dwight is immediately on him with the pepper spray. But he's also so loyal. Think about
That's
he even
true.
says in one episode, he says that he values loyalty and he'll go wherever they value loyalty the most.
That's true. That's true. All right. Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, there's the episode he fires the gun, in the office, and then I think it's pretty soon after that they make him clean up all the weapons around the office, and he's just pulling them out of random places.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So my wife is actually a counterphobic 6. So I don't think we have any weapons sitting around the house, but definitely some contingency plans.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. I love that. Well,
What
cool.
about
Okay.
Jim?
So Jim, see, okay, back and forth on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people call out that Jim is a 9, and yeah, and there's definitely aspects of that I can see.
Mm-hmm.
But being a 7 and watching that show and connecting with Jim on such a deep level, especially throughout the course of the show, like early in the show, and then kind of what midway through the show before all the athlete stuff comes up,
Mm-hmm.
he's really starting to get in these places where he's like, am I going to be stuck here? Like, and there's a level of
Mm.
commitment that he's battling with there. And then the athlete stuff comes up and it's an opportunity to jump on a new ship and head off to Philly to launch this company with all these exciting elements. He talks about wanting to open a bike shop. Maybe that's just my personal connection with him. But
He's
yeah,
not a 7. He's just a Bray.
he's just a Bray. There it is. That's fine. I'll take it. I'll take it. Side note, we actually played a game the other night where we were asking who would play us in movies. And for
Oh, yeah.
my little brother, it was just a resounding, what's the guy's name? I just went blank.
John Krasinski?
John Krasinski. Yeah, without a
Yeah.
doubt. So maybe it is. Maybe he's just feels like a brother. So what about you? What do you think?
Man, Jim's hard for me. I can definitely get both of those, 9 and 7. I'm the same way. Like, there's some things that I identify with Jim in. I don't think he's a 1 like I am, but that actually leads into kind of the conversation we were wanting to have about stress and the numbers you take on during stress. Because 7s, if he is a 7, 7s take on characteristics of 1 under stress.
Yeah.
And I can see that, like, at the end of the day, if Jim is kind of held, feet to the fire, I think he does want to do what's right and cares a lot about that. But in just your average day to day, he's a lot more jokey and pranky,
Yeah.
And so actually my identifying with his type 1 tendencies that he does have makes me want to get on board with your 7 idea for him.
Okay.
But I do think he's pretty tough. I'm not going to get upset if other people have different opinions about him.
Sure.
I'm not nearly as confident as I am with like Dwight as I am with Jim.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So
all right, let's move to a different show then. What?
Okay. So
yeah.
since I'm in the depths of Breaking Bad, let's talk about this one for a second.
Okay. Now, off the bat, I have to admit what I told you before we started is, which might get me in some trouble with listeners. I have never watched the whole thing. I've seen large chunks of it.
Okay.
And so I know some basic storylines. I know some of the main characters. I know kind of the whole plot idea behind the show. So I'll do my best to help, but don't roast me over this thing, people. All right. So anyway, go for it.
Yeah. So I would say, like, I mean, we'll go classic here. We'll go Walter White and we'll go Jesse. If you've seen the show, you know those two characters.
Yeah.
Walter's one of those funny characters, and I think my type that I'm pitching here might be based solely off of stress, because most of that show is just watching Walter White, very early on in the show get diagnosed with a cancer, and the dude's just like, his whole life is now responding and reacting from that diagnosis,
Yeah.
And so there's parts of it where I'm like, okay, the dude's a chemist. He was a chemistry teacher, but he's a fantastic chemist, very smart. So, there's a ton of reason to believe that he's a 5 with a 6 wing.
Okay.
And like we were talking about a minute ago, it's like you could take the angle that he jumps into the drug game, which that's one of the reasons I love that show, because I believe it actually shows a reality of, like, if somebody that had no idea what they were doing and jumps into, like, basically like a cartel level, like drug, game, what would happen? And it'd be a ton of stuff that I've never prepared for, never thought of.
Yeah.
Except if you were a 6, then you may have already thought about, hey, if I jump into the cartel game, this is what I might do. There's some thoughts.
So what's your thought on him? What do you think his Enneagram number is?
I think a 5 with a 6 wing would be, for me, I could settle with that. I would be happy with that.
All right. So what are some of the key characteristics of him? If he's a 5,
okay,
5-ness, but then also 7-ness when he takes on, 7 under stress.
Yes. So this is where it kind of gets tricky, maybe, because I think the fiveness is that, okay, he's very intelligent, has, dug really deep into his craft, doesn't seem like the most extroverted person. Um, and then throughout the show, as you see him in stress, there's this thing of, okay, maybe the whole drug thing was just trying to, like, one last whim, like one last, like, big hurrah with what time I have left. And then there was a moment in the episode I watched a couple of nights ago, and his wife, ex-wife, whatever, she's saying, "Hey, are you working on, like, on an exit strategy?" And the guy, he's like, "Yeah, working on it." But it's like you're not really seeing anything happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so for sevens, like, that's one of the things that we hate, is that when we're on, like, something good and there's, like, something adventurous and, like, exhilarating about it, we don't like endings. Like,
Right.
there's no good endings. And so there's some thoughts there.
Yeah.
But if from what you've seen of the show, if he was a six, which, I know we've dubbed Dwight as our six on the list, but if he was a six, how do you think from watching the show, he's responding in stress, taking on those maybe unhealthy attributes of a three?
Yeah. Okay. So this actually works well because me not having watched the show a ton, I'm going to try to give some just generic thoughts about sixes moving towards three, and you can
Okay.
tell me if that fits him or not.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you've been around this conversation much, hopefully you know that stress doesn't only bring out bad things in people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can bring out helpful qualities, survival instincts, things like that. And so I'll try to hit both sides of that. So sixes, when they get stressed out, tend to take on qualities of threes. Some of the bad qualities of that would be kind of losing sight of people, right? Like sixes are typically really loyal, people oriented, communal kinds of people. But threes, an unhealthy three, and some of the unhealthy things a six can take on would be more of the tasks over people. You got to get stuff done rather than caring about people quite like you normally would.
Yeah.
And so then the other kind of main thing that sticks out to me that they could take on negative with a three is kind of spinning things to make themselves sound better, right? So if a three
Yeah.
gets themselves in trouble or fails at something, they might retell the story and spin it a bit to make themselves sound better than what they actually were.
Yeah.
So that's a couple of negative qualities. Some positive qualities, though, if they take on those of a three, would be being able to get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes sixes have trouble making decisions in general, but when they take on some threeness, that little bit of pressure or stress can actually make them more decisive
Got it.
and also can give them more of a long-term vision rather than getting stuck in the weeds of right here, right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think? Does that
Oh my
fit him?
gosh. Yeah. So especially with, like, maybe more of the unhealthy attributes of a three, I mean, the dude constantly gets lost in his work as a meth cook for the cartel, or not for the cartel, but for Gus Dufresne. And then the idea of losing sight of people, like, he's constantly asking Jesse to do things that are just basically killing him. So yeah, I can definitely see some of that stuff. So, but speaking of Jesse, this is one of the ones I came across earlier today, that some people really think that Jesse is a four. And after going through the
Okay.
show and kind of coming back around to the show, that individualist side of Jesse, kind of being a black sheep. I mean, he was kicked out of his family. He is probably one of the most intense emotional characters that I think I've ever seen in a show.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that has to do with the stuff that he's having to do in the show, like
Right.
committing murder and things like that.
Mm.
But the guy is just always battling with this. I would just imagine, like, the emotional weight of all the things that he's done and going through.
Mm.
And then I mean, yeah, there's an artistic side to Jesse. There's I think this search for, like, value, this search for purpose in his life,
Mm.
that you see throughout the show. So I can get behind that, this idea that he's a four.
So fours, when they are under stress, tend to take on qualities of twos. Do you see
Mhm.
that in him?
Yes. And this is where it gets interesting, is that he does that. He gets involved with this girl, and it's really sad because he actually shows up to, like, I guess, like an addicts anonymous type meeting. and he's honestly there to sell them drugs, but then he ends up feeling bad and then starts dating her and then ends up giving her money and putting her in a home. And, and I mean, there's guilt there. There's shame there with different things, but you see him kind of like come in these waves of like, where he's really showing up for people and he's really helping people, or he's, sticking his neck out for Walter White in the midst of all this chaos. And so I think if there's something kind of solidifying for the 4, and then that stress thing, is that it seems like anytime that he gets in a really dark, kind of stressful place, he seems to attach himself to a person pretty consistently throughout the show.
Okay. So we're locking in on him in our 4 spot?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break so we can put together our list of the other numbers, and then we'll come back and talk about them.
Sounds great.
All right, we're back and we've got our list. So let's do this. We have 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9 still to go.
Yeah.
And so why don't I'll give, kind of a short description of each of those types plus what they do in stress, and then we'll fill in the blank about them.
Sounds great.
Okay. So we'll start with 1. 1's, typically very regimented, orderly, organized, dependable, by the book kind of people. But when they get stressed out, they take on qualities of 4s. And so they can maybe get a little bit more creative, kind of good sides, creative problem solving. But the bad side of it can be a little bit overly emotional and potentially even depressed, and certainly can like pull away from people just because they kind of feel like a lack of self-value, self-worth, things like that. So you had somebody for the number 1 spot. Who was that?
Yeah, so we continued with the Breaking Bad theme, and we went with old Gus, the Chicken Man. And,
Gus the Chicken Man.
Gus the Chicken Man. So you see this with Gus. The guy runs this major, drug operation, and he does everything by the book to a T. Folds his jacket perfectly every time he takes it off. But then there's quite a few times throughout the show where under stress, he kind of dips into his office where he's isolated. There's always this real like kind of darkness that surrounds him, but then what comes to follow is usually these pretty creative ideas to problem solve. So that's why I went with Gus.
Okay, nice. So number 2 was that one's mine. So twos are normally really helpful, servant-hearted people that just love to help others meet needs, right? And when they get stressed, though, this is probably the craziest change, in my opinion, on the whole Enneagram when it comes to stress, is that 2s will take on qualities of 8s, which can be really aggressive and, fearless, like tackle any monster, climb any mountain, bust through any wall kind of people. And so for 2, I said Detective Tutuola, Finn, who on SVU, if there's any SVU fans out there. And I thought about this because, for years he's kind of played the second fiddle role to Olivia. He's like usually the second in command around, and has just been kind of by her side for so long, helping, doing whatever's needed. But whenever he gets put into a corner, whenever somebody around him gets threatened and he gets under that stress from that, it's really easy to see him putting on the superhero cape of an 8 and like going out and busting some heads. He'll do whatever needs to be done and take down whoever whenever someone else around them is threatened. And so, and if you're anybody that's up on SVU right now, you've seen that in the last few episodes. No spoilers, but yeah. So I was thinking Finn for number 2.
Yeah, and can we just applaud how long the SVU has been going? Like, what an amazing show to be. Oh, what is it, like 20-something seasons?
Something like that. It's amazing. I may have seen every episode. I'm not sure if I've seen I have. I've seen the first ones too, because I remember some of the people that were on that first one that went away and came back. And
love that show.
Man, yeah, it's a great show. So awesome. Number 3, 3s, whenever just normally threes are your kind of achievers, get stuff done, performers, wear any mask, wear any hat, play any role, do whatever's expected of them in order to be successful, basically.
Mm,
But when they're put under stress, it's really interesting because they take on qualities of nines. And, the good ways that can work out is that threes can kind of take their eyes off the prize for a minute and maybe do a little bit more caring about people and the state of the world, not just their own ambition. But the bad side of it is that they can disengage. So threes are usually pretty competitive, but if they feel like they can't win, then they might just decide they don't want to play. Right. Yeah. And I'm not interested in this anyway. I'm going to, not play. So you had a pick for three. Who's your three?
So I like Breaking Bad. Obviously, we've talked about this. And if you like that show, then Saul Goodman, and he actually has his own spinoff. It's amazing. But I have never seen a character fit the bill for an Enneagram type 3 like Saul Goodman. Okay. This guy actually has a hanging rack in his little office in the back of a nail salon that has a bunch of costumes for when he goes and does different bits.
Wow.
And the guy is, nobody works harder, nobody pushes harder. The dude walks into a room and immediately can be a chameleon to get whatever he wants to get. But then at the same time, is like you just talked about under stress, you see these moments where he kind of loses sight of all of the achievements and he loses sight of the task, and he cares for his brother, he cares for his partner, all these different things. But then there's so many times throughout the show where he's getting his butt kicked, just by either the circumstances or other lawyers or whatever. And the dude just dips out and he's like, that's it. I lift my hands. I surrender. See you later. And so, yeah, love Saul. Great character, but the dude's a trip.
Yeah. All right. So we are moving into new territory here with the rest of our list. They're all from the same show. And it's a show that most people have probably watched at this point. I think it just dropped at the perfect time with all the stay-at-home orders and whatnot. And that is the incredible, terrible, catastrophic show that is Tiger King.
Yes.
I don't even think we have to discuss Carol Baskin. She definitely killed her husband and fed him to tigers. There's really no debate about that. I don't know anybody that's like, no, I don't think she did it.
Yeah.
We got two spots left on the list, 8 and 9. And unfortunately, we didn't put Joe Exotic as either one of those, so he's not technically on our list.
Mm-hmm.
But I do just want to make a quick case for him being a 4.
Yeah,
that's my gut reaction as a 1, is that Joe Exotic is a 4. He's a gay cowboy in Oklahoma that has a mullet and owns a tiger ranch. I don't know if you can get any more out there and unique than that, right? Come on.
Yeah, I think just the blonde mullet speaks for itself. That could be enough to argue the 4-ness.
So okay, so 8 and 9. Who do we got in the number 8 spot?
All right, we're gonna go with Doc Antle.
Ooh, Doc Antle, another person on that show who has 100% murdered people.
Yes, the dude is. I like his golf cart. I will say he has a cool golf cart. So let's talk about this though, Ryan. Why Doc Antle in the 8 slot? What do you see in that show with him and stress, him responding? Just during stress throughout the show.
And so Doc Antle as an 8, 8s typically know what direction they're headed and they don't really care what other people think or where they're going, and usually pretty outspoken about that. And Doc Antle totally is. He's just such a strong presence.
Yes,
when he walks in a room, he and everybody else know that he is in charge, right? Yep. I agree with what you said earlier before we were recording, that he's got to be an 8. So let's talk about that though. 8s go to 5 whenever they're stressed out. And so I don't know. I have to think about this one. Are there qualities of him that come out under stress? Did we see him under stress in that show?
Honestly, no, because the dude just seemed like he just always had it figured out.
Yeah, he doesn't give off, the air that he's stressed or doesn't know what's up.
No, I don't think he ever does, which maybe that almost solidifies the fact that why he could
Man,
be an 8.
yeah,
Because
because
yeah,
eights would want to cover that up as much as they could,
totally.
and so that would make sense. Now, I do think that after the documentary came out, obviously he was pretty upset about it,
Yes.
and I think he, well, just like everybody else in that show, I guess this doesn't set him apart. Went into a lot of legal action, I believe. So I don't know if that tells anything, but yeah, I have no problem with labeling him an 8. That's for sure. But
Hmm.
he's harder to peg on the stress number.
Yeah. Well, while we're on it, I'm sure there are leaders out there that have got an 8, like on their team, might even be an 8. What are some of those red flags for 8s when you start to see them dipping into kind of that 5 bucket,
Yeah,
either
that's a
both on
great
like
question.
the good and the bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. So eights, whenever they get stressed, tend to take on qualities of fives, right? And
Hmm.
there's some really good things about that and can be some really bad things about that. Eights are usually very decisive. Like they know what they're going to do and they're going to do it, right? They may tell you, but they also may not. They may just go and do it. Whereas fives, when it comes to decisiveness, are typically at the other end of the spectrum.
Mm.
I think that eights probably have the easiest time making a decision, and fives, I don't know, between fives and nines it might be tough, but fives typically have some of the most trouble making decisions. And they do that because they all of a sudden feel like they don't have enough information. So a big warning sign of an 8 being super stressed out is where they're normally very decisive, all of a sudden they're really unsure and they start needing to do more research and ask more questions, and they just don't quite have enough information. And it's
Hmm.
really, really weird because you're like, wow, what happened to you? You're normally so ready to pull the trigger on stuff, but now you're so apprehensive about it.
Yeah.
And so that can be bad, obviously, that paralysis to be able to make decisions. But the good side of it for eights taking on some stress and going to 5 is that sometimes eights, with their how decisive they are, can be a little trigger happy, right?
Hmm.
And be a little overly ambitious. And so that stress can sometimes cause them to slow down and make wiser decisions
Mm.
as they take on qualities of a 5 that they may not normally do. And so
Wow.
so yeah, it can be a really, really healthy move for an 8 to have a little bit of stress, and it causes them to slow down just a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. And I'll add, had the privilege of working with an 8, and we were under a pretty stressful season with our organization, and someone who was typically so kind of out in front, getting super involved in everything, became incredibly reclusive, and then, like you said, that when they would come out of that kind of hiding and that isolation, that search for more information almost felt very attackish, like towards me, because it
Yeah.
was like the information that they were seeking to me felt like accusations of like not having it together, accusations of not having it figured out, and because they're such strong personalities, that can come across that way. And so, to any of you guys that are leading 8s, just have a little patience there, have a little grace there,
Mm,
because that tension you feel, I think, is sometimes just a cry for help, like you said. So,
yeah. All right, so we're running out of time here. Let's wrap up our list. Number 9, we've got from Tiger King, one of the most amazing people on the show, in my opinion,
yes.
and probably the most like level-headed out of all of them, is Saf.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Saf was one of those characters that, as soon as they came on the scene, you're just like, wait, this person, one of these does not belong here. Like you said.
You seem slightly less insane than all the rest of them.
Yes. Yes. Until Saf gets her, like, basically her hand bitten off by a tiger, and then sticks around.
Yeah.
At which, that point, I'm like, okay, maybe you do belong here.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so let's talk about that because that's a huge piece of evidence in this whole Enneagram conversation. We're putting Saf in our spot for nines, right?
yeah.
Which nines are usually just as chill as can be, along
Yep.
for the ride, good to go, which, my goodness, like that, I feel like that describes Saf.
Hmm.
But then when they're put under stress, nines tend to take on qualities of sixes.
Mm.
And one of the there's bad qualities of that, which is anxiety and lack of trust, especially for people in authority. But there's also a really good side of that, which is loyalty. And I mean, come on, Saf got her arm taken off and then stuck around.
Yeah.
Like, talk about some loyalty. I mean, potentially even to a fault, right?
Totally.
And so I thought that was amazing. And the other thing I thought of, and this is maybe wading into some interesting waters here, but Saf identifies probably more as a man than a woman. I say probably, and stick with me on this. I was actually reading some articles on it because, early in the show, I think that Saf is identified as Kelsey potentially. And so there's some back and forth in the whole gender conversation. And so somebody was asking Saf, hey, do you get upset when people use the wrong gender pronoun?
Huh.
And Saf's I thought was just incredible, or Saf's answer I thought was just incredible was, whatever. Like, yeah. I don't really get that upset with it. Like, which I just thought was so cool. And to our point, so 9-ish, right? Yes. Because Saf was like, look, it's confusing. I was Kelsey. Now I'm Saf. Call me whatever makes sense to you. I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
Which I just thought, one, was really graceful from Saf, but two, really backs up our theory about Saf as a 9.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. Yeah. 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 So, man, what a list. We got some SVU and.
Let's go back over it. We got Gus, the chicken man.
Yep.
In our number 1 spot. Finn Tutuola, so Sergeant, good. I believe, on SVU. Saul from Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad.
Yep.
Jesse Pinkman and Walter White in the 4 and 5 spot from Breaking Bad. Then from The Office, we've got Dwight as a counterphobic 6. Fight me on this. I will fight you. Jim as a number 7 on The Office. Not going to fight you about that one. Then 8 and 9, we round out with our Tiger King people, which is Doc Antle and Saf. So would love to hear your thoughts on that stuff. Hit us up on social media or wherever you want to do that. I don't know if we're on Facebook at this point. It's Instagram for sure. Wherever we're at, hit us up with that. We'd love to hear your comments, feedback, threats, all those things about our list. So, Cody, anything else?
Man, no. Good talk. I love the list.
Yeah. If you're a leader and you've got this team right now that maybe you're still spread out, maybe you're back in your office by now, I don't know. It's so important, I think, for leaders to be able to identify the stress level of their people, because you are speaking to them where they're at. You need to speak to them where they're at, I should say. And the way that you interact with somebody and engage somebody and lead somebody should change depending on where they're at that day. Like if they are in a good, healthy spot, if they're really stressed out, right? Because people change under stress. And so your communication has to change along with them.
For sure.
And so being able to identify that is the first step in effective communication and leadership of them. And so I would just encourage you to consider that as you're leading your teams and looking at who's on them is, okay, how do these people change in stress? What can I learn from that? And how do I need to change the way that I communicate with them under stress? So any last words?
No, man, just appreciate it. And hope that you guys, if you have any questions, please reach out to us, like Ryan said. And would love just to help you guys be the best leaders that you can be.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on another Enneagram podcast.
As fellow leaders, we know it can be frustrating when it seems like you always run into the same problems on your team with the same people. But leaders just like you are learning how to lead their teams better using the Enneagram, and you can too.
So if you like what you heard today, we would love it if you would share this podcast on social media and leave a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts, preferably only good, reviews and ratings. That would be great.
If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram. We're at Another Enneagram, or head over to our website, anotherenneagram.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Another Enneagram podcast.